everyone, and welcome to Margin Reform's virtual event. Before I hand over to our esteemed speakers from game-changing service providers within collateral management, I wanted to quickly recap on the Zoom functions available during this virtual event. As you can see on your screens, there are a number of buttons at the bottom of the Zoom call. The first button is the Q&A button, where you can send in any questions throughout the virtual event. But we will answer these questions at the end of the event. Secondly, to make this more of an engaging event, we're going to be running two polls. One will be coming up now and one at the end of the virtual event. We will share these results on the screen and also later on via our social media posts. Lastly, there's a chat button. This chat button is disabled, but feel free to send us an email to info@Margin Reform for any other queries. Now let's start the poll. So the first poll question, set of questions will be coming up now on the screen. So question 1, which training format do you prefer? In workshops, online courses, or a combination of both? Feel free to start voting. The second question, how would you rate your current level of collateral expertise in your job, role, or industry? Are you a novice, getting there, expert, and always learning? Third question, would you be interested in attending sessions or conferences for industry-specific training? Yes or no are the options here. And last but not least, how often do you think the refresher courses are required to stay up to date in your field? Never, quarterly-ish, and annually. So thank you so much for everyone that's voting. We're at 19 votes so far. That's great. So keep on voting. I'll give it another 30 seconds. So going back to the top, which training format do you prefer? Second question, how do you rate your current level of collateral expertise in your job, role, or industry? Thirdly, would you be interested in attending sessions or conferences for industry-specific training? And how often do you think refresher courses are required to stay up to date in your field? That's great. We're up to 21 votes. So let me end the poll here and share the results. Okay, so on question 1, we can see that there's a combination of both, which makes sense, of in-person workshops and online courses. I think we're all tired of online activity, so it's good to see that in-person is balancing out there. On the second question, the one that's really come up, there's joint leaders here this round. How would you rate your current level of collateral expertise in your job role? And it's getting there. Some of you, you're at that expertise level, but always learning, which is great, which I love to hear. You can always look at ways to elevate your career within collateral management. On the third question, lots of you have said yes, you would be interested in attending, so that's great. Meeting people at these industry events are really good from a knowledge point of view, but also from a networking point of view. And then last question, we're at quarterly, so that makes sense as well. You want to be constantly learning, and every quarter is about right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to our host, my partner in crime, Shaun Murray. I'm going to turn my video off because I've been told a few times by Shaun that I've got a face for radio. But over to you, Shaun, and enjoy the event.
Thanks, Chetan. So, hi, welcome to this live Margin Reform virtual event. Happy Thursday. I'm delighted to be your host. As Chetan just said, I'm the CEO of Margin Reform. What do we plan to do today? Well, we're going to get into the intriguing world of collateral management and hopefully uncover some strategies that leading firms in our industry have adopted to enhance their team's expertise. I know that our financial landscape over the last few years has gone through some significant change. That has been driven by regulatory reform. In the face of those shifts, what have we seen from a collateral management perspective? Well, we've seen it become an essential part of the market for mitigation of risk and ensuring the financial stability of transactions and relationships from a financial trading perspective. So during this event, we plan to delve into the intricacies of collateral management somewhat, shed some light on its importance, and address some of the challenges faced by the firms in today's market, which is very dynamic. If we can come up with some innovative approaches to that, how you guys can help upskill your teams or yourselves, then that all the better for this. So we do encourage you to ask questions. As Chetan said, we'll have a Q&A at the end. It's a unique opportunity for you to discover, hopefully, some practical strategies that can benefit you and your organization. So once again, thanks for joining. Let's get started. Before we do that, I am going to do some intros. We have two panelists with us here today. So if they could introduce themselves, let's start with Helen. If you could maybe introduce yourself and your experience in collateral management, please.
Thanks, Shaun. Hi, I'm Helen Nicol. I'm currently head of product for CloudMargin. I have over 20 years experience of collateral management, working firstly for a couple of tier 1 banking institutions, and then more recently working on the vendor side for obviously CloudMargin and a competitor prior to that.
Super. Ivano.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ivano Bonfanti, and I am working at Acadia. And I've been with the firm for 8 years, and I work in the sales team with the jurisdiction comprising Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And my involvement with collateral management started when Acadia, back in the day, acquired a service called Protocol from Omjo, which was then replaced by a strategic partnership that we've been having over the last 5 to 6 years with CloudMargin. So our bread and butter business was originally around margin automation, and therefore, complementing margin automation with collateral services, regardless of being vendor provided or in-house built. But since the strategic partnership, we have also the opportunity to provide an end-to-end collateral system.
Awesome. Thank you both. Okay, so before we get started, let me just do a bit of context setting if I can. When I talk about collateral, I tend to divide it into two periods or two eras: BC, before crisis, and AD, after default. So the BC era, as we know, before crisis, collateral was primarily handled by two key parts of the organization: operations, who ran the day-to-day, the BAU, and credit risk. And credit risk were there really to provide guidance and support to operations. The necessary processes and procedures, or the internal processes, were generally written by credit risk. They'd be the ones concerned with risk appetite and actually the amount of credit lines they'd be allocating. And then the operations team for collateral management would be there to support those processes, make sure they were implemented, and then work with the legal agreements and the legal documentation to make sure that what was documented in those agreements was met as well. The contact with front office, in my opinion, was minimal. Trading weren't really thinking about fund transfer pricing at that point. They weren't thinking about how collateral was going to be posted or received based on the transactions they were executing. Sales had more of a role to play. Primarily, they would be working with the credit risk department to say, look, I've got a new client, I want to onboard the client. We want to have a variation margin agreement in place. And there would be some negotiation then on the arrangement for that variation margin agreement and what that might entail. And that may entail at that time a threshold that's not zero, maybe 10 million, 20 million, 50 million. It might have entailed some one-way thresholds, i.e. we pay you collateral, you never pay us. So one way against the organization, which clearly not good from a risk perspective, but wasn't unheard of at all. And then I guess the third thing I think about when I think sort of BC was eligible collateral schedules. So you may have had emerging market debt, and there's nothing wrong with that, but more of it than you get today. There may have been some non-investment grade corporate bonds, so junk status bonds that were being exchanged. In one instance, I saw a lien over social housing in the UK, and I'm still very unclear to this day how it was going to be liquidated in the event of a default, but fortunately, we never had to cross that bridge. So that's sort of BC. AD, after default, what did happen? We know that the G20 met in Pittsburgh in 2009. They then came up with their two main aims: to reduce systemic risk in the market and to increase transparency in OTC derivatives. They were the two main aims. The idea of that was then to come up with some ways of implementing that, and that was platform trading, it was mandatory clearing, trade reporting, and then collateralization of bilateral derivatives. So here we are 14 years later nearly. We have got a collateral and margin environment that is more advanced, more complex, more critical, and definitely more expensive, and possibly more fun, depends on where you sit. So how do we cope with that? How does the industry cope with it? How do you cope with it? How does the organization you're working for grow with that? That's what we're here to explore. So let's get into some of those questions. I'm going to come back to Helen and Ivano, just say very quickly, if you can just explain to us, Helen, very quickly what CloudMargin do, just to set the scene.
Sure.
Thanks.
So CloudMargin is a cross-asset, single instance collateral management platform. We are now utilised by almost 200 financial institutions of all shapes and sizes. And really our key focus is we strive to promote automation and drive those operational efficiencies across the whole collateral management and optimization lifecycle. So, as we've seen, and you've just described some of that, we've seen huge increases in volumes and the need to move away from manual processes to cope with those increases. So that's kind of what we're focused on providing.
Cool. And Ivano, you did go into it briefly, but maybe you can just give a quick synopsis on Acadia for me, please.
Yeah, so we started in 2009 with one single product, which was known as Margin Sphere or Margin Manager, as we call it today. And essentially that product, as I say, complemented a collateral workflow in automating the margin calls. With the arrival of the unclear margin regulations in around 2015, we got involved in developing a service which would allow impacted counterparts to exchange initial margin and reconcile initial margin. And from that, we developed a suite of products that actually evolved into, sensitivities calculation, backtesting, benchmarking, management of agreements. But as I said, also we provide a full end-to-end collateral workflow, as well as integrating into other services.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so both firms providing that ability to service yourself from a collateral management perspective, which is great. Cool, yeah. Okay, so let's move on. You're both bona fide experts in collateral management. So Helen, talk back to you. Why is it important for your teams to have good collateral knowledge within CloudMargin?
Okay, I think you've already mentioned the the crisis, I guess, and the status of what happened prior to Lehman's in 2008. Collateral was always very much a back office operational function, and the assets that were normally posted tended to be mainly cash and government bonds. Not always, but that was the majority.
Yeah.
The agreements mostly tended, certainly for bilateral OTC, tended to be netted agreements. You'd get one or two where you'd exchange initial margin or independent amounts, but they were limited. So it was a fairly straightforward process. As you said, not much interaction with the front office, didn't really need to look at eligibility in any real complex terms. That changed with the introduction of the regulation. So we went then for, the variation margin agreements, the initial margin agreements, the look to clearing, and really the need to try and move away from silos. So the whole process has become more complex. Now we're looking at which assets are best to post, not always from just a cheapest to deliver perspective, but looking at whole trading strategies depending on who the participants are. So collateral management as a whole has become more complex. From a vendor perspective, we have salespeople, we have business related product people, we have technical teams. Training becomes very important because there are many different types of asset class, and although workflows are similar, the actual underlying trades, the calculations, the end-to-end life cycle can vary.
Yep.
And regulation impacts that. So from a technical perspective, it's important that the teams understand what we're trying to build, why we're trying to build it, and how the work that they're doing impacts both the upstream and the downstream flows. So they need to understand this is what a buy-side institution requires from the day-to-day processing. This is what sell-side requires. How does it fit in with the trading operations? And how does that flow down to settlements and reconciliation platforms? That you can do in-house, but obviously, I think we all react better to external training and a wider input, I guess, because external providers are talking to numerous clientele from all aspects. So I think that's how it fits in for us in terms of what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to ensure that we build into the platform that then supports our underlying clients.
Nice. I think that gives a very good, thorough overview of how a product person thinks about it. Ivano, you're definitely not the product person, you're the salesperson. You're the one probably talking to the clients more than Helen is on the product side. How have you found it? What were your sort of thoughts before you took the course or before you wanted to take the course as to what good collateral management looks like from your perspective, and then how you wanted to squeeze that in through to your teams?
Yeah, that's right, Shaun. So as a sales team, I think we employ a consultative approach. So although our products are often pretty much developed as a consequence of either industry initiative or in response to regulation, so provide the technology to be compliant with regulation, I think it's nevertheless very important for us that as salespeople we engage correctly with prospects and clients alike by understanding the specific challenges and their issues. And that way we can establish whether we can provide added value, efficiency, cost effectiveness. So from my perspective as a salesperson, having the correct level of training will help us to gain that understanding and being able to engage and at a correct level with the clients and figure out what are the pain points and what we can do to support the resolution of the pain points.
Interesting. I know, Helen, you touched on it briefly there. You talked about the fact that and without doubt, you could both do the training yourselves, right? You could have to sit down with a group of people, but you've obviously gone out to external suppliers, margin reform, to help you with that. Why did you decide to find an external provider within CloudMargin rather than maybe doing something in-house?
I think, firstly, no one is an expert in everything. And I think to give a rounded view, I think external training is always better. I think teams relate better to maybe an external provider coming in, and I think, some of us are experts in maybe bilateral OTC as opposed to clearing, as opposed to sec lending. But I think the holistic view of how it all fits together is important. And I think having a team of people that come in externally and say, okay, we have a repo expert, we have a sec lending expert, we have somebody that's from front office or optimization to explain those end-to-end flows to a team that are working on, particularly from our side, building that platform and enhancing the platform as the regulations change, as the new requirements come in. I just think it gives a wider perspective rather than, that's Helen from our product team and she's going to do this training. It's also better from a cost perspective for us because obviously everybody is busy. We're all trying to do different things. And I think if we've got focus sessions with external providers, either providing online training or in-person classrooms, that ensures that people attend those sessions rather than saying, oh, actually, it's only an internal session. I can just, do this or multitask. It means there's a better focus on gaining that understanding. And I think to some extent, if there's a little survey or almost a test at the end, it's a tick in the box qualification for these guys that they feel they've achieved something and they've got a qualification in that, rather than just a little bit of ad hoc in-house training, which we do, but I don't think we take it to the same level as an external session.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think certainly my experience, lots of the large organisations have internal training sessions. Certainly, the benefactors of that are generally regulation, where they ask people to do quarterly trainings. Things that are more product based, in my opinion, tend to maybe fall through the gaps a little bit. They become more of a, if you'd like to, we have a suite of tests and trainings you can do here. But it does feel to me like Collateral misses out a little bit, because it's not a product defined as like an interest rate swap or an equity derivative or a repo trade. It is because of those trades that we have collateral management, right? And it tends to fall between the gaps a little bit from a regulatory perspective. Clearly, the regulation side of what we learn is quite needed. It's very essential for people to be able to understand their requirements. So, Ivano, I guess Acadia have done a fair amount over the last 5, 6, 7 years when UMR came out, and have been heavily involved in that regulatory journey for everyone. The growth of the company, everyone has seen from the outside. Clearly, with the latest, Acadia being now an acquisition by LSEG, the company is due to grow further, and we can all see that journey. How do you think then, you personally, you can't answer Acadia, but how do you think then as a firm would be a good way to address that? Like, as the more people are coming into it, more people need to understand collateral. How do you think firms are thinking about that collateral management sort of level of expertise?
Yeah, so what I wanted, if I may, Shaun, I just wanted to, there is a common denominator with what Helen just said, and where we perceived, the need of seeking some knowledge from the outside, is because we didn't want to limit ourselves to give an interpretation of collateral management based purely on the knowledge of our product. And that's the reason why we decided that, with the training that margin reform provides, we can have a wider understanding that can be applied regardless of whatever solution we are considering. It's a generic understanding which has then top-down approach, and then it goes more into the details. I mean, as I say, we started with one product. We now got a portfolio of around 15, 16 different solutions. We're now part of a much bigger family within the post-trade division of London Stock Exchange Group. So obviously there's a lot more to be to learn. There's a lot more material that we need to become familiar with. So I guess it's fundamental to make sure that we stay one step ahead of the game, if I can use the expression, but making sure that as the markets evolve, as the challenges take different directions, or things have to be considered in a different way, we understand how that evolution is going to pan out, and therefore, again, having an external sources will help us to get a bit of a wider
summary. So I think in summary, then, from both of you, what I'm hearing is you've got the knowledge internally within a subset of people, but actually having a wider net of knowledge, wider net of experts coming in to help gives you that broader depth, deeper depth, I should say, broader product suite of training needs that can be met in a simpler fashion, rather than having to cobble it together internally. So yeah, it should be very clear, because we've mentioned it a couple of times. And margin reform has helped CloudMargin with a piece of training. We went through this. We have a case study that is on our social, so people can read that. Helen, why did you choose margin reform? What process did you go through to find a provider who met your needs?
Okay, so I think what was important to us was finding a provider that could tailor the training to a variety of levels of experience. So we have some new joiners that knew nothing about collateral because they came from completely different background, right through to those that have maybe knowledge of one or two different asset classes but don't have any maybe front office or settlement experience. So finding a provider that could tailor the training to meet all levels of experience and knowledge is important. HR team spent a lot of time looking at a variety of solutions, including a mix of online and in-person courses, and went through a process of validating the different aspects that were covered during those different offerings and looking at how the individual sessions could be tailored to our specific requirements.
Yeah.
So I think in the end they narrowed it down to 2 or 3 providers and asked the teams here whether they wanted online or in person. And I think the fact that you guys can provide a variety of that, starting off initially with some online and then moving into more of the classroom interactive training, I think that was important. I think the guys wanted, or some of the teams wanted, full collateral management lifecycle training, so that they could then get a better comprehension of how the software we provide fits in with the industry and the value that it adds. So that there was quite a lot of work, and it wasn't an overnight decision, as I think you guys are aware. It took several months before we looked at, okay, this is what we're going to do and we're going to move forward.
Thank you. And Ivano, obviously we're working with Acadia right now. This is sort of in progress. We went through a bit of a process. You actually took the training course and fed back to me, and I think that was wonderful for us because it was great feedback and enjoyed it. When you had those discussions internally, what was it that jumped out for you from the online course that you took?
Yeah, so as you say, Shaun, I trialed the course first. And I established that it was going to be useful for us as a sales team because of the level of content, the way the course is delivered, the amount, obviously, of knowledge, and last but not the least, the additional course material. And I thought, that's perfect for our needs. As I explained earlier on, but it was so well received that other colleagues from other departments, from the onboarding and operations teams, have also signed up. And as you say, we've been partnered with Margin Reform on a number of initiatives. So we know that you guys have been users before becoming consultants. Therefore, you have a thorough understanding from both sides of the fence. In terms of how everything fits together and the variety of technology solutions that are available out there.
Yeah, it's a tough word, that technology sometimes, Ivano. I get stuck on that one. So I think, as I think about collateral training, as somebody that gives collateral training and as an organisation that does that, I have come across, obviously in client conversations, multiple clients who want to get deep into the detail on this. How do you feel then about maybe a question for Helen first off, how do you feel about the level of the depth that your teams have gone to in that training? Clearly with a lot of different products cleared, bilateral, repos, securities lending, equity financing, you can go across a very broad spectrum. Do you think there is somewhere more easy to start? If in your recommendation, if firms were looking to do this, would you start with a particular product, or would you go with that high level, broader approach in the first instance? What would be your thinking on that?
I think it really depends on who your audience is. So I think, one of the benefits that you guys give is you can do your collateral 101 generic. This is perhaps a grad coming in that knows nothing about collateral, and what is collateral, why is it important, what is it used for, that level. generally, and then go into the specific asset classes. So I think the most common is probably the bilateral OTC, but obviously, you know, that has changed a lot, as we've already said, you know, pre and post crisis. And I think, you know, I guess when I was learning, you know, hands-on in the job, you know, we were taught everything from, you know, how are the trades calculated? What is a total return swap? Does this look odd? What is my margin requirement? You know, I know my clients. Am I sending a margin call out for $300,000, or am I sending it out for $3 million? Do I know, you know, if there's something wrong, if it's normally 300,000 and suddenly it's much larger? I think in a way, the downside of some of the automation is we've taken away some of that. So I think whilst we're trying to teach the teams to be able to look at the exception-based processing and the value add, they still need the basics. So some of the fundamentals, how do I know whether that's the norm? And I think, you know, the bilateral OTC, as I said, is probably a good starting point. But then, you know, how does a repo you know, differentiate itself from that? You know, what's been the impact of central clearing? How does a future fit in? Because, you know, quite often we look at the bilateral OTC piece, and then if we look at ETD, we're kind of turning things on its head for part of certainly the calculation piece. So I think, you know, being able to start with what is collateral for those that don't know what it is and where it fits in with credit and market risk, and, you know, how the flows go down to settlement, reconciliations, disputes, that's very important. And I think, you know, the ability to be flexible in the training, depending on who your audience are, gives you the differentiator.
Yeah, fair. I think that I agree with all of that. I think creating that engaging learning environment is clearly what we intend to do. I do like that you identify training needs. I talk about this a lot when it comes to optimization, particularly. It's not a one size fits all. From a training perspective, it's exactly the same. It's not a one size fits all, because everyone's got a different starting point as they go through the process of learning collateral management, whatever that may be in their world. Thinking about actually identifying those needs, setting those objectives, managing the KPIs that you get out of it. What do we want people to learn? What do you think, Ivano, as you go through this, what are you hoping your teams are going to take away? What are the benefits that you expect them to come away with, outside of just being, they've got some knowledge and they might be dangerous, but what do you think?
Yeah, so again, first of all, the idea is to get a wider understanding of what the challenges are within collateral management, but also how things have been developing over the years. And again, most of us started within the team. Obviously, we started as the UMR regulations came into play. So it was important for us to understand what came before that, because now we appreciate that collateral management is becoming pretty crucial, because it's not just a matter of mitigating risk, but it takes into account have a better control around cost funding, being able to interact amongst different departments. It's not just an operations type of activity. You have the front office now with the middle office operations and market compliance, which have to work together in order to set up the correct collateral infrastructure to make sure that it is managed effectively. So that's important, because that's the way it's developing, and it's going that way, particularly post-regulation. But it was interesting to appreciate what the development has been over the years. And I think, if I remember correctly, right at the beginning, you make a statement to say, collateral exists in all situation in life, which is a very true statement. but it's also important when we bring it down to financial markets to understand that this is something that doesn't, is being applied as a practice within financial institutions for just a few decades. It's not, a long time ago that the first collateral infrastructure were implemented. So that gives us a good understanding. Again, the idea for us as salespeople is to make sure that we are aligned with the understanding of our prospects and clients, so that we can actually appreciate what the challenges are and what we can do to support their specific needs.
Yeah.
Just like Shaun, I'd just like to say some of the feedback that we had, just carrying on from Ivano, your comments there, from some of the team that took this course, said that them learning about the pre and post crisis and how, I guess, the industry evolved and the challenges that were there meant that they actually felt it triggered some innovative ideas within the teams, and it helped to facilitate engaging discussions and idea generation about, okay, this is how it was, this is how it is now, what could we do to be innovative and move things forward to the next stage? Because we're talking different sets of eligible assets. We're looking at tokenized assets now, and some of the team that are working on the platform now obviously didn't know about the pre-crisis flows and how it was handled from an operational perspective. So I think it's interesting. Some of us have been around for years, but for those that haven't, it's explaining, well, this is how it was, this is how it is now. You guys need to work out how it's going to be in the future. Yeah. But understanding what the regulations dictate that we need to support.
Yeah. There's always so much to unpack with collateral management. We're dependent, we go to BC or AD after default, as I call it. Regulation is not sitting still. Collateral management doesn't sit still. Margin management doesn't. Product types don't. Collateral is here to stay. We know that, unless something really weird happens and regulators say, yeah, you can go back to how you were, let's trade unsecured, which I don't see anyone wanting to do. We see China going non-netting. We see uncleared margin rules coming out in India, uncleared margin rules coming out in Mexico, SFTR obviously happening on the repo world, and securities financing with CSDR, T+1 settlement happening. That's going to have a massive impact on collateral management. Trade reporting is going to get more enhanced with the EMEA refit and with CFTC rewrite. So there's a whole host of things affecting collateral, which people think about, but think about in isolation generally. And I think actually the way I see the market going, and this happens, I think, with technology firms and with other firms, is that the more we industry share, the better that is. But equally, and you alluded to this earlier, Ellen, best practice doesn't always work, right? Efficiency isn't always the best. It's always the best way, but if efficiency breaks down or STP breaks down, you also need people who understand collateral management to be able to fix it. So getting to that point where, yeah, you've got efficiency and I've got T0 settlement and I can use digital assets or tokenized assets, great. But I also need to know how things work in the background and why I'm doing certain things. So that knowledge gap, I guess it is at the moment, or scarcity of knowledge across maybe some pockets of the industry and some organizations within the industry, does need to be filled. And I think we all get dragged to the lowest common denominator, right? If somebody's still on a fax machine, then you're on a fax machine. If somebody's STP and they're super efficient, you're STP and you're super efficient. So just in summary, before we do go to Q&A, is there anything, Ivano, you would want to say about the Elevate program that Margin Reform offer? Any summary, anything concise and super you can give me? Go on then.
I think the course is designed for anybody who has some form of interaction with collateral management as an activity, whether you're a collateral manager or a consultant or a vendor of a collateral system. And the beauty of it is that it caters regardless of the experience of the person that decides to take the course, in my personal opinion. So if you are an experienced person like Helen, it would be an opportunity to compare notes, if anything, or get some affirmation or some updates. If you are fairly new to the sector, it gives you a great insight about, you know, how it has developed, why it's becoming more and more a crucial part of financial institutions. So yeah, I mean, it also clearly explains how it's changed. Obviously, you taken it from a financial crisis and the direction that has been taken with the introduction of the regulation. So I think it's very comprehensive.
Super, thank you. Helen, anything you would add?
As I said earlier, nobody is an expert in everything, and I think it's always good to get somebody else's view and interpretation. I also think refresher courses are always welcome, because, you know, regulations and markets are changing. You know, you can sit on lots of working groups, but actually just to get that overall, yes, this is how this works, or, you know, this is how this calculation is. I think that's beneficial to everybody, no matter how experienced you are.
Yeah, I think that's, we all love a story, don't we? And if someone can tell you stories about previous experiences, then it's a great way of learning when you think about your current environment and how we operate. Thank you both. Don't go anywhere. Chetan, hopefully you're still there. If you maybe have any questions, good.
Let me launch the poll question, which is a nice segue to what Helen was saying there. We're all still learning. You know, some of us been in Collateral for many moons. But what we wanted to ask here with the last question was, which of the following future Collateral related training courses would you be interested in attending? So the first one is the Collateral Masterclass. And to the point Helen made earlier around, actually, if you've been in the role for 2-3 years, you've been doing your margin calls, but you want to take it to the next level, you want to elevate your collateral management career, we can go into areas around data management, around pricing, around the ecosystem, understanding how to become a better collateral manager. That's the masterclass. The optimization, which Shaun mentioned, you know, front office focused area, but also looks at the kind of assets and also the initial margin. So optimization, more kind of front office lens. Collateral valuation and pricing. Again, Helen touched on it earlier around disputes and valuations. Does your numbers look right? Does it swing? So there's a lot of information around that. Repo and securities lending, sometimes the forgotten child of collateral management. We're passionate about that, and we've recently announced a partnership with Peerpoint, who have been the leaders in that space around repo and securities lending, because they all kind of connect together. We, you know, margin reform, call it our core training, which is cleared, OTC bilateral, repo securities lending, and then ETD, exchange traded derivatives. Learning all of that makes you a very powerful collateral manager. And moving into kind of the collateral technology ecosystems with CloudMargin, Acadia, and Ivano here. When I started out, you know, 20 odd years ago, there wasn't many technology firms out there. Now there is so many firms out there, but there's a collaborative ecosystem, and understanding how each of those technology providers hand off data is really important. And there are smart ways to exchange information in a secure way. Then we move into kind of day in the life of a collateral manager, working through how has that world changed now that the regulations, you know, after default, what's happening? How has that world changed for a collateral manager? And Shaun touched on it, unclear margin rules. I hear and see quite a lot that, you know, UMR, unclear margin rule is done. It's not done. It's only started. There are 7 countries out there with draft rules in consultation and looking to go live. And we mentioned it earlier. You've got Mexico, Saudi Arabia, you've got India, China, Korea. All of these are going to be hitting people, and they all have different flavors. So again, and also around the model, you know, did the SIM model behave during the, you know, the LDI crisis in the UK? Did it behave during, you know, UBS and Credit Suisse? So now the industry is looking, and the regulators are looking at models, saying, is the SIM, could it be updated more frequently? So there are discussions in the industry around that. So thank you to the 16 of you who voted. That's great. I'm just going to end the poll now. Share the results. Let's see who the winner is. Oh, Shaun's going to love this. Okay, it's collateral optimization is the one that people want to learn about. So that's great. Thank you for that information. We will share the poll results that we've done here through our post on social media after the event, also on the recording that we will share. I'll then just finally go to some questions that have come through, Shaun. So,
yep.
First one we have here is, how do you review the horizon for collateral management? What's the view from the panel?
How do you review the horizon, or how do you view the horizon?
Yeah, so how do you horizon plan for collateral management?
How do you horizon plan? Helen, do you want to have a go? I can see you on my screen at the moment.
Sure. I think as a vendor, we try to keep up to date with the regulations. We sit on a number of working groups, whether that's ISDA, FIA, Acadia. We sit with the Acadia group as well. And we spend an awful lot of time talking to clients, regulators, other market participants, just in terms of what is everybody doing, what's the feedback that's coming from the market, what do our clients need next, what are their pain points and challenges, how can we make it better. So, there's always something new, there's always something that can be improved. I think everybody's book of work goes out for the next 5-10 years if we were to do everything that we'd like to do. But obviously, things change. So things that might be important now, might not be in 6 months' time. We've seen, we're working in conjunction with Acadia at the moment in trying to automate and improve substitution workflows. Now, substitutions have been done for 20 odd years. Could we all do them better? Could we increase the automation and make scaling better? Things like the UK gilts crisis, when we had the LDI flows, that caused some institutions pain, across the marketplace, in terms of them being able to access their assets and look to post. So, there's always improvements that can be made. So I think it's the case of, we have a team of people, and we work with consultants like yourselves in terms of understanding what is coming up and what do we need to be on top of.
Cool. Yeah, Ivano, I'll come to you in a second. I think with a different question, my view on that would be that, like all parts of collateral management, it's, if you want to look at the horizon, you really need to look at your starting point and understand what your strategy is. I know we've pushed this out sort of in conversations with clients fairly regularly. If you don't really have someone who's looking at collateral strategy and you are still operating in silos, then you're not probably achieving what you can in the most efficient and cost-effective way that it is possible to do it. So actually having somebody, maybe somebody in operations, maybe somebody in front office as well, in the COO world, possibly business management world, who is looking at collateral management, understanding it, and bringing the teams together with legal people and compliance people, and somebody else who might be doing something over here for clients on the collateral side and the optimization desk, and bringing that together so there is an information flow moving around the firm. It's a good way of getting that horizon scanning going, not just from a regulatory perspective, but actually thinking about your technology, your processes, your procedures, how you interact with clients, how you want to service clients better, all of those good things. Chetan, what have we got for Ivano? Let's find another question. Make it a difficult one though.
Yeah. Okay. Ivano, ready? So this one is, we hear a lot about market leading practices or best practices in industry. How does your firm engage with those?
So I think, I think traditionally whatever we've been developing over the years was pretty much on the back of industry initiatives and or regulations, right? So it is fair to say that before the LSEG acquisitions, Acadia was owned by a consortium of tier 1 banks, as well as some other technology firms. So the idea is that there are some specific needs out there in the market, and therefore we've been invested through our history with resolving certain inefficiencies, if I can use the expression, and therefore that I think that's what we've been doing, and that's what we carry on doing. There was at the beginning, I remember somebody from a tier 1 institutions used to say with regards to the exchange of margin calls that back then the exception was the rule. So the idea was to actually make the exception and a standardized workflow to become the rule. And let's not forget that everything is all aimed towards reducing operational risk. Operational risk is a big dollar value attached to it, and therefore you have to take into account all these different aspects to provide the right level of technology, as I said earlier on, to create mitigate risk, but also create efficiency, transparency, being compliant, take into account the fact that now various departments within an institution have to work closer together, as well as amongst counterparties. You've got the various departments of a firm that have to be communicating more efficiently. So there's a lot that has to be taken into account, and I think that's the way to look at it.
Interesting. Helen, anything you want to add on that?
I think standardization is important as well. I think we've talked about it for a long time, but I think we are now making inroads across vendors and across both buy and sell side organizations to really try and move that forward. Obviously there still always needs to be a level of flexibility and configurability, but we need control. And the more we talk the same language, and and even now we're seeing the market infrastructure of the organizations like ISLA, they're also working together to try and get some standardization on how things move forward. And I think that's important going forward, trying to take us to the next level.
Sorry, Ivano.
I was just going to mention also that technology needs to be nimble in order to be able to adapt to the various changes that we're facing now and in the future.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that whole sort of agile iterative delivery is probably what Collateral needs more of. It's very clear to us, Chetan and I, and I'm no doubt you too, that the ecosystem for collateral management and margin management, there has been a proliferation of new technologies in the last decade, right? And you certainly Cloud are one of those. From a client perspective, we see a huge number just going, I just can't deal with the amount of technology that's out there. There's lots of people doing similar things with competing levels of technology. Everyone's talking about, well, last week they were talking about tokenization or crypto. This week everyone's talking about AI, and we're all moving into, okay, let's work out how Collateral now works for AI. There is in my view, a sort of a leveling of that, which is not everyone's going to get there. And we talked to, you mentioned ISLA and ISLA there, Helen, the common domain model. These are really useful things the industry is building towards. The question is whether the industry will get there in delivering it. And I know there's great use cases going on, and I think it's really positive for the industry. There's clearly a commercial angle to every conversation, right? Whether it's a technology one, an optimization one, a building your systems internally as a large organization, a large bank as an example, or a buy side, to deal with some of those things. The industry has to move together. It's no good people doing it in isolation, because it's just not worthwhile. There's no bang for the buck there if you do it on your own. So there has to be this movement, and the industry has to move that way. And I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't. I'm just saying that's, in my opinion, how it has to happen. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of years, I think, in and around the regulatory T+1 bit, which is clearly going to be a big delivery. But it's going to be an interesting 2, 3, 4, 5 years as people start to work through where they're going to spend their investment dollars.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we are seeing that certainly a number of the solution providers, whether that's the trading platforms or the settlement platforms, or the likes of the Acadias and the various collateral management platforms that sit in the middle, are starting to work together. I think certainly you mentioned the common domain model. I think we're trying to make sure that when new builds happen, that can we connect? Are we talking the same language as the likes of Acadia or others, so that the flows work, and so that everybody is talking the same language? So I think inroads have been made to that, and I think as those financial institutions use some of those vendor platforms, whatever they are, they'll see that we are trying to work towards maybe not best practice, but standard operating processes and procedures that are getting us to that end state, which then makes disputes easier because we are all talking the same language. And putting that level of flexibility, because all organizations want to grow their business, so you've got to have some differentiators in there, but within that controlled mechanism.
Fair. Okay, I don't want to go over time, so I'm going to put a halt to proceedings. We do want to offer to people, if you're not unaware of our training course right now, Chetan, I think, has put a question in the box for everybody to see. So if you're interested, we are going to give away some free and discounted logins. If you are interested in the Introduction to Collateral Management course and your firm hasn't utilized it before, please do fill in the link that Chetan has provided. I can't see it there. Chetan's rapidly Control-Ving at the moment, so he copies and pastes it. We will send it out as well as part of the post virtual event email to you guys and girls. Thank you very much to you, Helen. Thank you very much, Ivano and Chetan. Thank you very much for your assistance. Look forward to catching up with you soon. If you do have any further questions for us at Margin Reform, or indeed Helen or Ivano, please do drop us a line at info@marginreform.com, or drop me a line, or Chetan directly at chetan@marginreform.com, or Shaun at marginreform.com. I'll breathe. That was a long sentence. Thank you. Have a great Thursday.